it's chaos.
In our community, rape, murder, gun violence, and gang violence is on the rise. We are killing each other for something as little as being part of another town. For example, if I'm from S Avenue in Riviera Beach, Florida, but I happen to move to 6th Street in West Palm Beach, Florida, the people that think they know me on 6th Street would say I'm trying to move here just to see what the game plan is and how they run the streets. By that, I mean they would actually accuse me of telling the other gangs how many guns they have, what's their next move, what section of town they're going to actually hit next. On July 22nd, 2007, the students of the Children's Coalition and Northwood Youth Empowerment Center took a trip to Washington, D.C. to discuss the violence that has taken place here in West Palm Beach County. We met with senators and congressmen of Florida and Georgia. We took our concerns to the Congress to try to receive funding for the program that could also curb the violence in our community. We also spoke to the Secretary of DJJ in Tallahassee about lowering the count of juveniles that are entering detention centers and also getting the proper education after they have been released from the center.
I mean, obviously, we need to do everything we can to address teen violence, and you know what I have noticed during my time in public office, which is going on 14 years now. Unfortunately, too often legislators approach addressing issues like teen violence with simplistic solutions for a very complex problem. And you know, by simplistic solution, I mean lock them up and throw away the key type approaches to policy, not addressing the root of the problem, not going back and starting at the earliest stages of childhood to address at-risk kids and make sure you take care. I mean, sometimes it could be as simple as making sure a kid has breakfast before they go to school in the morning, because there's plenty of kids from impoverished backgrounds who don't get breakfast. If you don't have breakfast, it's you're operating on less brain power and you're not doing as well in school, and then the cycle starts to spiral downward, and pretty soon you end up with an older kid who begins to get in trouble. And so if we start to address the problems when kids are at the youngest stages and prevent them from beginning to spiral downward, then we won't have as much of a teen violence program later on down the road. But unfortunately, because the political fixes are easier when you just have very restrictive, aggressive criminal justice solutions to things like teen violence, that's how we end up, if not making the problem worse, certainly not solving it.
What would you do to fix that problem if you?
Well, it's like some of the things I just talked about, making sure that kids whose parents can't afford to make sure that they go to school with a good breakfast, that they are getting a good education, adequately funding education and equalizing funding for education so that a high school on one side of town has the same resources that a high school on the other side of town does, and making sure that you have the healthcare needs of children addressed, and making sure that if there are psychological problems that these kids have that are at risk, that we can address those. I mean, you've got to look at the whole child, and government has to fund programs that are going to address all the different myriad of problems that kids who are at risk face. I mean, those programs, there are so many proven programs that show that if you catch those kids early, or if you even intervene when kids have begun down that wrong path, you can set them on the right path before it gets so incredibly bad that the only solution is a criminal justice solution. So education, healthcare, Head Start, all kinds of different ways at addressing the problem. I mean, we used to in Florida fund full-service schools in the areas of school districts where where many neighborhoods didn't have access to social and human services. So you used the school as the place that most parents felt the most comfortable going. Their kids were going there anyway. You set up healthcare clinics at the school. You set up all the government programs that most of the families needed to access at the school site, because so often families that are struggling, they're not necessarily comfortable dealing with the government bureaucracy, and it can be intimidating, especially for people who have been in trouble before. They're really not comfortable going to a government setting because their only experience with government has been through the criminal justice system. So if you start to consolidate services in a place where families who have at-risk kids are comfortable going, then we can start to try to get them those services, and then government has to actually provide the funding. But of course, when the Republicans controlled the legislature and the funding in Florida, and they dismantled full-service schools after Governor Childs, who was the last Democratic governor that we had really started to build them up, and now they're basically gone. Right. So, at the end of the day, what we have to do is we have to elect leaders and make sure we ask the candidates that run for office the right questions, so that we can elect leaders that share the priorities that you all do, so that we can, and that we do, so that we can make sure we can address those problems and recognize that those are complex problems that are going to require complex solutions, and there are no quick fixes.
How do you feel about teens in neighborhoods that has a lot of violence?
Well, let's talk about the fact that I have been involved in working with young people all of my adult career. At one time I was a juvenile judge, and I worked specifically with teenagers. But how I feel is that we have gone drastically wrong in taking away the hope that young people have for a better education. I also am mindful that people live in poor housing, poor job opportunities, and that leads to a lot of bad situations. Now, having said all of that, the great majority of teenagers don't get in trouble, do good in school, but it's the ones who do get in trouble that create the problems for the others. And there's some bad things that happen. At Dunbar Village recently, for example, in West Palm Beach, one of the more violent things that I can imagine somebody doing to a lady and her son took place. How we go about curing these problems is with good education. And that's said all of the time, and not enough money is put into these efforts by politicians. When we try, we get defeated. And at the very same time, I'm absolutely certain that young people do need better opportunities in this country. We've always had teenagers. There's not going to be anything new. Teenagers are going to one day have teenagers. And the great hope for all of us is that they will be on a good path that will allow for them to have a good life.
Well, I've been somewhat outraged about the violence for the last probably 15, 20 years. And in fact, that's why I'm where I am now. I don't know how much you know about my background, but I was police chief here in Tallahassee for the past 10 years. And in this community, 10 years ago, we were able to stop gang violence in Tallahassee. And I say stop it, I mean stop it. In that we brought the two gangs together. I forget whether North Side, South Side, whatever they called themselves at the time. And this didn't happen as simple as I'm saying it. We brought them together a couple of times. Fights broke out in the church. We brought them together another time. Shootings took place in the parking lot. But we kept bringing them together, and we finally got them all in a room, made sure they weren't carrying, sit down and talk to them about what is it that you guys, what do you do with? What do you guys think you do with? And make a long story short, we put them together and challenged each gang to put together a rap video, and we would get a recording studio. We would get professionals to come in and assist them with choreographing everything, getting their lyrics together, getting the music set up, all of that. And we did that for about 6 months.
That was a good idea.
And they stopped fighting for 6 months, and we made them sign these papers and said, guys, this is what your gang's going to come out with. Whatever gang wins will win in this environment. And they did. They put their stuff together. Like I said, it took 6 months. At the end, we declared them both winners, as we were going to do from the very outset.
Okay.
And we created opportunities, because now they knew some different skill sets, and some of those guys, and one right now, his name is Rudy, works for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. He is the second or third, in one of the bureaus for emergency management, and you've probably seen him on television talking about hurricanes and hurricane preparedness. And he traveled around Tallahassee talking about how that affected and changed his life. And that happened because I got so outraged about it. A kid called Quince, and I know all their street names. I don't know their real names and that kind of thing, because that's all they want you to call him. So Quince lost his eye and was in the hospital. And my officers responded and the shooting and all that kind of thing. I went to the hospital and talked to him, and I was just outraged that here this kid is, about 15 years of age, has lost his eye. His chances of succeeding are so narrow and so limited that I said, we got to do something about this. And I went and went out there in the community, got the Urban League involved, and we were able to pull that off. So to answer your question, outraged about it. That's why I'm here. I stopped my job as police chief, and everybody in town was going, and I do. When I was police chief, I make no bones about it. We had one of the best police departments in the country, recognized nationally, have won 4 straight best police departments in the country awards from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And but that wasn't what that didn't accomplish a thing. I mean, yeah, the police department was being recognized, all these awards, but kids were still being killed on the streets of America. And so when the governor said, "Can you come and do this thing?" I said, "Absolutely, I'll do it. I'll try." And so that's what I'm trying to do, is to stop the violence, help our kids. But I'll be quite candid with you. These are us. These are you, my brothers and sisters, and you guys are out there. Not you guys, literally, but I see us, going to jail and going to the grave a lot sooner than we should.